Richard Lawson possessed all that a man could desire: wealth, power, and an empire established through years of ruthless business decisions. He was a self-made millionaire, feared in boardrooms and envied by those who aspired to success. However, amid his towering fortune, there was one significant thing he had lost along the way: his capacity to care. Buddy, his golden retriever, had been his faithful companion for years, always welcoming him home with warmth and resting his head against Richard's leg after long, exhausting days. But Buddy was old now and, worse still, blind. His once keen eyes had become cloudy, and his movements were slower, more uncertain. Where Richard had previously found solace in Buddy's presence, he now only perceived inconvenience. The decision had been weighing heavily on him for weeks, and finally, he acted on it. One morning, he drove Buddy deep into the forest. Trusting as ever, the dog sat in the passenger seat, his tail wagging faintly. He didn't know their destination, or that the man he loved more than anything had decided to leave him behind. Richard halted the car on a secluded dirt road, stepping out and opening the passenger door. Buddy hesitated briefly, sniffing the unfamiliar air. "Go on," Richard said, his tone cold. Cautiously, Buddy stepped out, his paws sinking slightly into the damp earth. The wind rustled through the trees. Strange and unsettling, Richard stood there for a few moments, gazing down at the dog who had once been his closest companion. Buddy tilted his head, sensing something was amiss, his ears twitching as if waiting for reassurance or a command, but none came. Richard turned back towards the car, shutting the door behind him. Confused, Buddy whimpered as Richard started the engine. The dog took a few tentative steps toward the sound, his tail wagging ever so slightly, filled with hope. But then the car moved. Buddy barked, and Richard pressed harder on the gas pedal. In the rearview mirror, he saw Buddy take a few steps forward before stopping, his head turning left and right in search of the only person he had ever trusted. Richard clenched his jaw, forcing himself to look away. It was done. The drive back to the city felt strangely silent. No heavy breathing from the passenger seat, no familiar presence at his side. He reassured himself it was for the best. A blind dog required care, attention, and patience, things he no longer had time for. Back in his penthouse, Richard poured himself a drink, convincing himself he had made the right choice. But that night, sleep eluded him. The image of Buddy standing lost in the forest kept invading his thoughts. He dismissed it, telling himself the dog would find his way or he wouldn't. Either way, Buddy was no longer Richard's problem. But fate has a way of balancing things. In the forest, Buddy remained in the same spot for hours, his ears twitching at every sound. He whined softly, sniffing the air as he searched for a familiar scent. He took cautious steps, then another, navigating the uneven ground covered in fallen leaves and damp earth. He stumbled yet continued, his heart pounding in his chest. Soon, the rain began, cold and relentless, as it soaked through Buddy's fur in his struggle to move forward. He had no means of knowing where he was or a guiding voice to direct him. He was alone. The sounds of the forest were alien, branches snapping, distant howls of unseen creatures. Panic gripped him, but still, he pressed on. Hours flew by and exhaustion overtook him. His legs trembled, and his paws were raw from stumbling over sharp rocks and roots. Finally, he collapsed beneath the shelter of a fallen tree, curling into himself. The forest felt vast, and he was just a blind, abandoned dog. But his story was not over. A few miles away, a man sat by a small fire, pulling his tattered coat tighter around himself. His name was Sam, a former soldier who had lost everything upon returning from war. He had witnessed events that haunted him and lost more than he could endure. Now, he lived wherever he could, under bridges, in abandoned buildings, or in the open wilderness. When he heard the faint whimpers through the rain, he hesitated. The sound was weak and desperate, stirring something long buried within him after years of hardship. He grabbed a flashlight and cautiously moved toward the sound. That was when he spotted Buddy, soaked and trembling, curled beneath a fallen tree. Sam crouched down, reaching out slowly. The dog flinched initially, but then sniffed the air, slowly moving his head towards Sam's extended hand. That's when Sam noticed the cloudy, milky quality in Buddy's eyes. The dog was blind. "Hey there, Buddy," Sam said gently. "You all alone out here?" The dog whimpered, pressing his wet nose into Sam's palm. Something tightened in Sam's chest. "All right," he murmured. "Let's get you warm." Buddy spent the night curled against Sam, the fire's warmth easing his shivers. The next morning, Sam fed him scraps of food, observing as the dog devoured them hungrily. There was something about Buddy that felt familiar. Perhaps it was because Sam understood what it was like to be abandoned, to be left behind when no longer needed. Days turned into weeks and Buddy began to heal. Sam worked with him, guiding him through sound and helping him navigate despite his blindness. And Buddy still trusted humans, following Sam faithfully, always listening and learning. Months later, in a city far removed from the forest, Richard Lawson sat on a bench. His clothes were no longer tailored, his face lined with stress. His empire had crumbled. A business scandal had ruined him, and those he had trusted had turned their backs the moment his wealth evaporated. He had lost everything. As he sat there, staring at the ground, he heard something, a familiar panting, the soft padding of paws against pavement. He looked up and there, walking beside a scruffy-looking man, was Buddy. Richard's breath caught in his throat. The dog looked healthier than before, with clean fur and a stronger body, and his blind eyes no longer held confusion, only certainty. Buddy walked with confidence, guided by the man beside him. Richard's heart raced. "Buddy!" The dog stopped, lifting his head slightly, but there was no recognition, no wagging tail. Sam looked at Richard, his expression unreadable. "You know him?" Richard swallowed hard. "He was mine." Sam's face hardened as Richard opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. What could he say? That he regretted his choice? That he wanted Buddy back after abandoning him? Buddy sniffed the air and then turned away, walking forward with Sam. Richard watched them go, a deep, gnawing sensation settling in his chest. He had lost everything. Yet seeing Buddy walk away, strong and unbroken, made him realize that this was the most significant loss of all. He had cast aside loyalty, and now loyalty had cast him aside. The moral of the story is that true loyalty and love should never be discarded when they become inconvenient. Those who abandon true companionship for selfish reasons may one day find themselves abandoned by the world. True wealth is not gauged by money or success, but by kindness, compassion, and the relationships we cultivate. The way we treat others, whether they be people or animals, reveals who we truly are.